Hey everyone, it's Diana Bigham, and this is going to be the first of a series of weekly lives right here on this spot every single Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time. So thank you guys so much for joining me. We are talking about tantrums. So how many of you are a parent, or maybe you're a childcare worker or an aunt or an uncle, and you're like, please give me some tips on how to deal with this tantrum. So if you have a child or a teen, someone in your life that tends to throw fits or tantrums, one of the best ways on knowing how to handle it is to figure out why they're throwing the fit. I firmly believe that we have answers to this question, and I want to try to approach at least several of these angles or reasons why kids throw tantrums in this particular video. So I'm Diana Bigham. If you don't know me, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm also a registered play therapist, which means I use the form of play to help people find healing and health, mind, emotions, and in relationships. And what I want to talk with you about is really comes from years of experience working with children, specializing in families and relationships. And so I want to talk with you about tantrums and that all behavior has a purpose or a function. In other words, everything that you see, any way that a person acts or speaks or doesn't act and take action, there's a reason behind that. We are actually motivated for different reasons. And so when we're looking specifically at tantrums, if we can decode why a child's having a fit or a meltdown, some kind of outburst, then we can really address the root of it. One of the things I love to tell the parents I work with is that good behavior is a byproduct of a healthy heart. So what I mean by that is when our heart is healthy, our mind, our emotions, when they're healthy, our behavior is going to be healthy. It's never going to be perfect. So let's get that clear. It'll never be perfect, but it can get healthier. So when we think about tantrums, we're going to talk specifically about younger children today. So some of this definitely applies for older children. So if you have a teenager that throws a lot of fits, that has attitudes and anger outbursts, or maybe their fits don't look externally big, maybe they tend to shut down or become withdrawn. These simple questions I'm going to ask you are going to also help you identify why your older kid might be struggling as well. But some of the examples I'll give you might more pertain to like the younger children. So know that it still applies. There's lots of different reasons, but here are the biggest reasons why children throw fits, why they're having problems and struggling with expressing their emotions in a healthy way. So let's talk about the first one. I don't know if you want to own this or admit it, but sometimes as adults, we have our own issues and we can bring these issues and burdens into our relationships with the people that we care about. So one reason why kids throw fits is it actually might have something to do with us as parents. So number one, if we are taking our child's defiance and opposition personally, that might be an issue on us as the adult. So we can have our own buttons or triggers. So let's say I'm triggered. I'm upset and overwhelmed because my child is throwing a fit because their shoe doesn't fit. And so that's a tantrum. Maybe let's pretend I have a 3-year-old. My kids are not 3 anymore. But if I have a 3-year-old who's throwing a fit because they're frustrated that the shoe does not get on their foot, they can't get it on themselves, then they might throw a fit. Now, this is not a tantrum that's being caused because there's something wrong with my child per se. It might actually be more of my expectations. You know, why am I so upset that my child's upset? Do I have a need for my child to just be like this with their emotions? Unless it's happy, I can't accept it. Is that an expectation that I have? How am I doing when my child's feelings are not positive? Do I only have the ability to handle happy feelings? So those are questions I want you to ask yourself when you're thinking about when your child's throwing a fit. It may be that my expectations are the issue. Or I could be having, let's say I'm really overwhelmed, having a bad day, so I'm really short fused or irritable. Or let's say I'm super task driven, which I am. So if I'm in my left brain, and I'm very task oriented and I'm focusing on what needs to happen around the house and what I got to get done, and I'm not very relational and kind and patient. And the only time I'm talking with my kids is when I want something out of them, like, hey, did you clean your room? Did you take out the trash and do your chores? Get out here and take out the trash. Did you feed the dogs? If the only time I have an exchange in the relationship is this transactional nature, then I'm bringing in stress. And so, of course, my kid might want to throw a fit, because part of the need that our children have, which I'll get to in a moment, is relationship equity. Like, they need connection with us. So one of the reasons why kids throw fits is it might actually have something more to do with us as the caregiver. How are we doing? Are we checking in with our own mental health and well-being? How are we doing with our relationship skills? So that's one thing. And it also is the solution, by the way. So when we identify the problem and can decode what's going on, we can defuse the issue as well. So parental self-care is really important. The next thing is routines. How are the routines in the house? Well, this summer we have really let go of all the routines to some degree. We let our kids stay up late and just had the opportunity to sleep in. And I'm like, sleep in, it's fine. But a few weeks out of school starting, we start preparing our children to get back into a new rhythm and routine. So, for example, we have our kids get up a few weeks before school starts. We start to slowly transition them to wake up earlier and earlier. Now, you could do it cold turkey, but you might have cranky, tired kids, which if they're cranky, then you're cranky. And that's not really cool with me. And so we gradually acclimate our children to a new routine. And right now that school's a week out, we have our kids waking up between 7 and 7:30 in the morning. And then as we get a little closer, it'll be between 6:30 and 7. So that's kind of the rhythm that we do, is we have our kids wake up at a certain time and get ready for bed at a certain time. But how are your routines? We are actually designed with this thing called a circadian rhythm. And so we naturally have this thing of, I want to go to sleep and I need to be awake. And if we have different bedtime structures, where kids can, let's say weekdays, we allow our kids to go to bed at a certain time, but the weekends it's even later, like a 3-hour or 2-hour difference, and wake up times all over the place, that's going to be hard on our child. It'll actually affect their moods. Sleep affects moods. So when you're looking at your routine, is your child getting enough adequate sleep? How's their room environment? Is it conducive for rest? What does that look like? Are they having electronic time and blue lights from the electronic devices that we expose our kids to? Are they having that before bed? That actually stimulates part of the brain that makes it more difficult to hit that deeper levels of sleep, because there's actually different sleep stages. And if you want your child to have restorative sleep where you're not having to fight them to wake up, then we really want to take a look at our routines. How's the routine? Is there time for activity? Is there time for rest? What does that look like? And are we consistent? Because it takes a few days for our circadian rhythm to reset. So have you ever had it where your child was on a good rhythm and routine, and then you traveled and had a different routine and it was hard to get back into the rhythm? Well, that's what's going on, is you're kind of fighting their circadian rhythm. So we want to make sure that for the most part, we have a pretty set routine with our children when we have the set wake up time and bedtime. And it doesn't have to be exact. Like if it doesn't happen within the next 10 minutes, we're completely off. There's a little bit of margin and cushion there. But how's the routine? And is that something that we need to change? Do we have some kind of daily schedule that's consistent? Then we want to look at nutrition. So the third thing is nutrition. How's your child's appetite? Are they hungry when they should be hungry? Are they satisfied when they should be satisfied? Or are they grazing throughout the day? And are they eating nutritional meals? The gut is considered the second brain. And the reason why is because there's so many moods and different kinds of things happening in our feelings because of what we're eating. There's what's called serotonin receptors. There's a lot of serotonin receptors in our gut health. Serotonin has to deal with the feel good, happy feelings that we have, along with other kinds of things like dopamine levels. And so when we eat junky foods or unhealthy foods, whether it's artificial dyes and preservatives or just junky, greasy foods, that actually literally affects our moods. literally. So how's your child's nutrition? Are they getting enough lean protein? Are they getting enough fruits and fresh vegetables? What's happening for your child? Are they hydrated? Is the brain getting what it needs to regulate the rest of the body? So you want to make sure that your child's getting adequate nutrition, and make sure that they are not having too much sugary drinks. We can eliminate that completely, really. But if that's not your lifestyle, that's fine. But just make sure that it's not often. Are they craving sweets, or are they craving, junk foods? Are they on a mac and cheese, hot dog, taco kind of diet? If so, we want to make sure that we introduce healthy foods to them. That's going to be really important to address any kind of picky food habits. And so nutrition is going to be really important as well. Stimulation. So when I say stimulation, like, are they getting enough activity and not too much activity? And I talk about this in 3 different areas. So on stimulation, is your child getting enough physical stimulation or exercise? I actually have 2 dogs, and they came from the same litter, although they look like different breeds. And one of them, actually both of them, needs activity, but one of them needs it more so than the other one. And they both need like affection and playtime. One craves it more than the other. So they have their own different personalities. Well, it's kind of like children too. Kids need lots of physical activity, lots of social interaction, and mental challenges. They want to be trained and given work to do. But at the same time, we don't want too much. And so that depends on the breed that you have and the child that you have. Every child's unique, but they all require physical activity. Some require more so than others, or maybe they'll start acting up. So like if you have a border collie, and if you don't put that border collie to work, they're used to, like, down the line in the breed, like they round up, cattle or whatnot. And so they have to be given a job to do, or they'll get bored and they'll start chewing shoes, digging holes in the backyard, eating socks, getting into trouble, barking a lot. So for some kids, they need a lot more of that physical stimulation than maybe your other kids. They need it all, but some might need it more than others to help them because of personality wiring and all of that. And so that could be one reason why kids throw fits, is because they're just bored. They need physical activity, but not so much that they're running around all day long and they're exhausted. They need time for rest. So you have to look at what that rhythm looks like for your children. And I say rhythm because it's not like this equal set defined thing. It can change for different seasons and moments, like when you're sick, like you don't want to go running around everywhere typically, right? And so you want to make sure that you are paying attention to your child's needs. So not only do they need physical activity, but social interactions. We are designed as beings that need and thrive off of relationships, but some need it more so than others. Some of us are hardwired to be extroverts, where we absolutely have to have lots of people time. And some of us are more introverted, where we need people time, but in small dosages and in certain settings really are more conducive for us to be happy. And so you're looking at, what does that look like for your child? And so again, that's physical stimulation, which is like exercise and rest. The social stimulation, which is connection and playtime, with peers and others, but not too much. And then also you're looking at mental challenges and stimulation. Are your kids so bored academically that they get into trouble and they tune out? Are they being challenged enough? But at the same time, are they not being over challenged, where they're having no mastery and skills, like they just feel like they're not good at anything because everything goes over their head and we're not adapting to their learning style? So what does that stimulation look like for your child? So that's another reason why some kids throw fits. Another one is connection. So this is a little bit different than social stimulation and being around people. This is actually more emotional connection and bonds. Sometimes children throw fits because they want attention. Have you ever said that? Have you ever thought that maybe a teen or a child was manipulating to get attention? Well, why is that a bad thing? Sometimes kids will act out for attention. Sometimes we might throw a fit for attention, but that's because we need connection and bonds. We need to know that someone delights in us and we don't have to do anything to earn it, that someone enjoys being in our presence. And so what does that look like? Is your child acting out because they're needing connection? Um, is the time that you're spending with your kids not really quality? Like you guys are just maybe on electronic devices and they're not really getting that emotional connection and bond that comes with conversation. Do they constantly leave the room after bedtime? Can you snuggle a little longer? That's one sign that they might be wanting more connection time with you. Just one more storybook, one more song, you know. Maybe they seem to interrupt constantly. That might be another sign that they might need more connection time. Or maybe they seem to be withdrawn, even though that sometimes can be interpreted as, okay, they want more space. True, that may be so, but it also might be that the connection that they're getting is just not good, that they try to withdraw, and they shut down and they're losing hope for good connection. So that could be another sign that children need more connection. Another reason why kids throw fits is going to be power and control. Like we are designed to have dominion over the earth, and so part of one reason why kids will throw a fit because they need a greater sense of control and independence. Independence doesn't mean left alone, unsupervised. What that means is I get to make some decisions over my life. So does your child or teen challenge the rules that you have? When you give rules, do you explain why they're there? Do you give them choices? Do you allow them to pick out their outfits? Do you allow them to choose what they pack in their lunch, assuming you're teaching them that what should be healthy and included in it? Do they have a sense of control that's age appropriate? And are you empowering your kids? Do they tend to argue back about things? It could be that they're trying to fight for independence and they really want support from you to help them feel celebrated, even when they have a difference of opinions in you. What does that look like? How do you talk about those kinds of things? And are they feeling celebrated for exploring and having an opinion? The other thing is kind of like the additional catch-all category. Here's an area that I define as additional because there are other reasons why kids will throw fits and have a hard time. One could be chronic pain. So if your child has a physical condition where they're not feeling good, obviously that's going to affect a person's mood. So they may be having fits or outbursts because they just don't feel good. And maybe they're having other thoughts that come along with that. Maybe they had a bad traumatic experience, and it doesn't have to be big trauma like a car accident or something. It could even just be an emotional rejection where the wound is so big and that's why they're throwing fits, which it could be the other areas like a lack of connection. But this is something specific and unique. Maybe your child has a speech delay or sensory processing issue. Think about it, a speech delay. So I've worked a lot with especially 3 and 4-year-olds where they're at the point of getting kicked out of their childcare centers because the tantrums are so big. Well, some of these kids, for example, might have sensory processing issues, and so if this child has a hard time with the environment, with the bright lights, the fluorescent bulbs, sometimes that can stimulate them in different ways that makes them feel uncomfortable, the harsh lighting. Maybe there's lots of sounds coming in. They have a auditory sensitivity. And so that really is overwhelming. If there's a speech delay, maybe that child is trying to communicate something to you. And so they can understand what you're saying, but they're having a hard time communicating and being understood. So that's frustrating. Imagine being in a foreign land where they speak a different language and you can kind of understand what people are saying, but it's hard for them to understand what you're trying to communicate. Well, that can lead to a very difficult situation where kids get frustrated and their capacity to handle that stress is so small that they'll flip their lid, and that's what the tantrum is all about. All tantrums are is this feeling that I have inside is bigger than my ability to manage it. That's all that is. And so part of our goal is to help train our children to know how to take care of their feelings and for us to come alongside them to solve these different areas, these big common areas where kids throw fits. So what is it for your child? Do they throw fits because, well, we got to do better job at taking care of ourselves as parents. So how's parental self-care going? How are they with routines? Do you have a good routine in the household? The third reason could be nutrition. How's nutrition for your family? How's the stimulation? We talked about 3 different areas. How are they doing? Are they getting enough stimulation, or are they getting enough activity, social interactions? Do they tend to misuse items like cutting a doll's hair? They're probably looking for some kind of way to be mentally, stimulated and challenged, and they're just bored. How are they doing with connection? How's the bond that they have with people? So not only do they have time with people, but how's the connection? The other reason is power and control. That's a sixth reason. And the seventh is kind of a catch-all additional category where there could be other things going on that's making it difficult for your child to manage their emotions. So if you want to learn more about this and get some more tips on this, we actually have a free PDF we would love to give to you. So I'm going to send a link. So after I hop off of this live, I'm going to drop a link in the description where you can go to download our free tantrum taming checklist. And in this, I share these very same tips I talked to you about. You can go through kind of like a self-inventory as you're looking at your family and the reasons why maybe your child's throwing a fit. And as you can kind of identify the reasons why your child might be throwing a fit, that's the first step in knowing how to best address it. So I hope this has been really helpful. Click on the link that I'm about to share so that you can get your free PDF.